So Nick Spencer's run has come to a conclusion with Amazing Spider-Man 74 this week. As a longtime Amazing Spider-Man reader and collector, I wanted to kind of give you guys my thoughts on this conclusion, as well as the run as a whole. So I'm going to be talking about this issue, the whole run, and the future of Amazing Spider-Man going forward in this video. Now, I mentioned on my recent live stream over in Around the Boxes that I wasn't a huge fan of Sinister War as a whole. It felt like a kind of lackluster conclusion to what I thought was otherwise a really great run on the book. For me, the problem with Sinister War was mostly that not much really happened. If you think about the actual story of Sinister War, there wasn't really a beginning, middle, and end. They just kind of established all of the villains, and then the entire series was just an action montage with Kindred narrating the whole time. So it was kind of boring and hard to follow. When it comes to actually criticizing this storyline, I would compare it to other similar series finale storylines in Amazing Spider-Man's history. Some of the recent ones that I can compare them to, both from Dan Slott, which, you know, there's lots of criticisms to be said about Dan Slott as a Spider-Man writer, but Goblin Nation comes to mind. This was the big conclusion to Superior Spider-Man, and this story was actually really cool. It featured the Dr. Octopus Spider-Man being Superior Spider-Man versus Green Goblin, and ultimately concluded with Peter Parker coming back and facing him in the series finale. The other big event that I can think of would be Go Down Swinging, which was actually the conclusion to Dan Slott's run. Also featuring the Green Goblin. You may be noticing a trend here that whenever spider writers need a big storyline, they just bring out the Osborns. But Go Down Swinging was also a huge storyline featuring Green Goblin when he donned the Carnage symbiote and became Red Goblin. And that was a whole big event leading up to issue 800 and being the conclusion of the run. So if I look at those two storylines, which are both really, really cool, and a lot happened, and then compare those to Sinister War, and you can kind of see how they don't really compare, to be honest. Sinister War, they did a couple of things that I really didn't like. The first thing that they did was having half of the series be in another mini-series. You guys, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I do not like when comic books do this. I want the main story to happen in the main series. You know, decades down the line, when you look back at The Amazing Spider-Man, you should be able to see the whole story involved in there. But this was common in the 90s when they would cross over between all of the series. It gets a little messy and it's kind of hard to follow it years down the line. And as a collector, it becomes really annoying because do I put these Sinister War comics in my Amazing Spider-Man section or do I put them in their own section? It just gets kind of messy. I also wasn't a huge fan of the actual Sinister War comics because they all feel a bit rushed and lazy. I mean, you look at the covers. It's kind of a boring cover. The font, like, I could have photoshopped this cover in 2 minutes. I mean, they just put the text at the top and that's about it. The formatting of the actual cover is kind of strange. You look at the second issue, similar story, third issue, and fourth issue. They're all just action montages of Peter. And the same is true for the actual Amazing Spider-Man issues. You look at the prelude issue. It's just Spider-Man, there's Kindred holding Spider-Man, there's Spider-Man on the ground, and there's Kindred and Spider-Man fighting. It's just a little disappointing to see, especially considering these covers are Mark Bagley covers, and Mark Bagley is one of my favorite Spider-Man artists of all time. So I know that he's capable of really great covers. You look at some of those covers from the 90s with Venom and Carnage, and they're incredible. So I don't know why these covers are a little lackluster for me. But as far as the actual story of these comic books, yeah, nothing really happens. But that is up until issue 73, and then more importantly, 74, the most recent and last issue in the series, and that's what I want to kind of talk about today. I wanted to give that background so you guys kind of understood where I was at going into this issue. I haven't really been enjoying Sinister War that much, which is honestly pretty disappointing because I've really liked Nick Spencer's run. I thought he's done a really good job on the book. But when it comes to issue 875, I loved it. I thought it was really good. And I really wish that what this book accomplished could have been in Sinister War as a whole, and I'm not really sure why it wasn't. One thing I can say for sure is that this book made a lot more sense than Sinister War. Sinister War was a little bit hard to follow. I think that's kind of the best example I can give on that is JP Creations. You guys might know him from YouTube. We've made a lot of videos together. I recently was telling him that he should start picking up The Amazing Spider-Man again because it's getting really good and we're about to have a new creative run. And he started picking it up at the beginning of Sinister War. And of course, you're gonna be a little bit behind if you haven't read the whole run leading up to the conclusion. That makes sense. But he was telling me how he was having a hard time even just following the story. And that's where Sinister War was a bit of a mess. This issue, I felt like that was not the case. The story made sense, and it was a really good story. So what Sinister War lacked in a beginning, middle, and end, I felt like this issue kind of made up for it with its own beginning, middle, and end. I mean, this thing is a thick book, so there was lots of story included in here. One of the things I really loved about this book in particular, and really Nick Spencer's run as a whole, but I'll get to that in a little bit, is it added more context to past events and stories. Right from page 1, where you see this page from Spectacular Spider-Man 200 of Harry Osborn's death, it establishes added context immediately after of Harry Osborn kind of meeting with Mephisto and going to hell. I loved that he added that additional context to Harry's death. Obviously, this added a lot of context to Sin's past. Shut up, computer. As I was saying, obviously this whole storyline added a lot of context to Sin's past, and then of course adding a lot of context to One More Day. It seems like Nick Spencer chose a lot of these past Spider-Man stories that people either loved or hated and just added a little bit more context to try to kind of smooth them over a little bit. And all in all, I really like what he added to those stories. I thought one really interesting twist of this comic book, spoiler alert, of course, if you haven't read this issue yet, go and read it, then come back and watch the video. I thought it was an interesting twist that there was 2 Kindreds. Did not really see that coming, I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of just believed that it was Harry Osborn, but the twist that it's actually Gabriel and Sarah, I thought that was really, really cool. And of course, Harry Osborn dying, again, kind of makes sense. We've learned that he was a clone and not really the real Harry. What this pretty much means is that Harry Osborn has been dead ever since Spectacular Spider-Man 200. So the Harry Osborn we've seen all these years has not actually been the original Harry Osborn, and that's kind of interesting. But all in all, I feel like the number one thing that I'm taking away from this issue that I thought was really great, and it's right there on the cover, it really reinforced Peter and MJ being back together. You know, Spider-Man writers have kind of teased them getting back together numerous times. Dan Slott has done it so many times, and it never really pans out. It felt like this time was going to be different. Nick Spencer really seemed to be trying to get them back together, and everyone really thought he was going to completely undo One More Day. Now, while that didn't happen in this issue, it does feel like they are really setting up Peter and MJ to actually stay together this time, which I'm really happy to see. I want them to stay together. I'll talk a little bit more about what I want from the future of Amazing Spider-Man towards the end of the video, but I was really happy to see that this issue really solidified them together. And hopefully the creators on the next run will kind of take that ball and run with it. All in all, I felt like this issue was a pretty noteworthy conclusion to a great run. Sinister War, not so much, but this issue itself was actually a really awesome ending to Nick Spencer's run. As far as Nick Spencer's run as a whole, I want to kind of give my thoughts on that because I haven't really talked about it much on here. I really loved Nick Spencer's run. I was kind of sick of Dan Slott's writing style by the end of his run. There's a lot of criticism of Dan Slott on the internet, and I do want to say credit is due. Credit is due. He wrote The Amazing Spider-Man for many, 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 many years, and he wrote a lot of really great stories. I really enjoyed Spider Island, Ends of the Earth. Superior Spider-Man was controversial, but it was a really, really fun series and a really cool idea. I felt like he wrote some good stories, after Superior, but it was kind of downhill around volume 4 for me. I felt like Parker Industries was just a meh. But he kind of brought it all to a good conclusion with Go Down Swinging. I thought that was a really cool story. But by the time Nick Spencer was coming on the book, I was ready for change, and I felt like as soon as Nick Spencer started writing, there was an immediate change. It felt like a return to form for Spider-Man. Now, I'm not going to dive into that too much, because there's a really great video on YouTube made by Godzilla Mendoza. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can check that video out if you haven't seen it already. He really just breaks apart what makes Nick Spencer's first couple storylines really, really good, and how it kind of departs from Dan Slott's writing style of Peter Parker. What I will say about Nick Spencer's run is it really felt like a love letter to Amazing Spider-Man's history. You guys might not know this, but before Nick Spencer started writing The Amazing Spider-Man, he actually went back and read every single issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And I felt like it really showed in his run. Because what I kind of got the impression from reading his run was that when he read through all 800 plus issues, it seems like he was just making a note of any plot threads, characters, storylines that he wanted to resolve, add more context to, reference, or really just bring back. And you would feel this in the story. Something would happen and it would reference, oh, this happened back in Amazing Spider-Man 238. And it was really cool to see those deep cuts. We haven't really had those in a while. Because in Dan Slott's run, he would only reference things that happened in his run, which, mind you, was very long. But it was cool to see a bit of those, like, oh, I remember that happening in the back issue that I have over in my boxes. I felt like that was really exciting. But it really just showed that Nick Spencer really took his role as the Spidey writer seriously. He knew that he wanted his run to have an impact on the Spider-Man mythos as a whole, and I really appreciated that he put that care into the book. You don't really see that a lot. One problem with that is it did make it a little bit hard to follow the story at some points. They would make some of those deep cut references, and it'd be a little bit hard to follow if you haven't read every single issue of Amazing Spider-Man, which I haven't. So there were some of those references that I didn't get, and so it made it a little confusing at times, but all in all, it was easy enough to follow the story. But that was one thing I noticed during the run. It did make it a little bit hard to follow. But all in all, if I had to rate Nick Spencer's run, I'd give it an 8 out of 10 at least. I think it was really good, a solid 74 issue run. I wish he was sticking around on the book longer, and I'd love to see him return in the future. But for now, we're stepping forward with a new creative team into Amazing Spider-Man Beyond. And I want to give my thoughts about that briefly here. I am very nervous for Beyond. It seems like they're going to be trying some things, and I am not sure if I trust them with it. A couple of things that I am mostly concerned about going into Beyond. This idea of having multiple writers on the book seems like it has a risk to get messy. It could turn out really good. Plenty of great artistic pieces have multiple writers. You look at TV shows, you look at movies, things like that, they have multiple writers. So I get it, it's possible. But when it comes to comic books, I'm a little worried that it's gonna end up being a bit messy with writers passing the baton between issues, and the storylines and the writing styles are kind of gonna be all over the place. So hopefully they know what they're doing. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt until it comes out, but I am looking to see how that's gonna turn out when those issues actually start hitting the shelves next week. I'm also not too excited about Ben Reilly's return. He's a cool character, okay? But I don't read The Amazing Spider-Man to read Ben Reilly. I read it for Peter Parker. And when they first started teasing this Beyond storyline, they really made it look like Peter Parker was going to be dying again. And we've tried that. We've been there. We did it in Superior Spider-Man. People hated it. I don't think they're doing it again, especially now that we've seen more previews. It looks like he's just going to be in the hospital with some serious injury, as if he hasn't been through enough with Sinister War. So it seems like it's only going to be temporary. They're just going to take Peter Parker out of commission for a few issues, and Ben Reilly's going to take over as the main Spider-Man to kind of cover for him in the meantime. It'll be cool. It'll be fun. I just hope it doesn't last too long. I want Peter Parker back, and I don't want Ben Reilly to become the main Spider-Man. He can be there as a side character. He's cool, whatever. but I'm not really that excited about it. It does look like this new Beyond creative team and creative direction is really tying back to the 90s style. The art style looks very 90s. Obviously, Ben Reilly is from the Clone Saga, which is all 90s all over it. So it seems like if you're a fan of the mid to late 90s run of Amazing Spider-Man, this Beyond storyline is going to have a similar vibe to that. That's just the impression I'm getting looking at the covers and what they're kind of teasing from it. I am cautiously optimistic. I hope it's going to be good, but I don't know if I'm going to love it as much as I've liked Nick Spencer's run. But like I said, hopefully it'll be temporary. I would predict it'll probably wrap up close to issue 900. If Peter Parker is out of commission for a little while, I would imagine he would come back for the big issue 900 milestone. So I wouldn't expect it to be too long of a hiatus for Peter Parker. However, we are talking about the future of Amazing Spider-Man. I have been reading Amazing Spider-Man for years. I've been picking up every single issue since 700, and I've read dozens and dozens of back issues. I want to kind of give my thoughts on where I would like to see Amazing Spider-Man go from here. Personally, and I think a lot of people agree with this, I want Peter and MJ to get married again. They were teasing it in Nick Spencer's run. Peter mentioned that he wanted to propose to Mary. I'm amazed that he never did. I thought for sure he would at the end of issue 74. I mean, this would have been a perfect moment for it. Right at the end of the main story. Where is it? I thought for sure he would propose here. Maybe it's implied that he did, but it wasn't there, which I thought was a little bit weird, but get them married again. Peter and Mary Jane should be married. We can all agree at this point that One More Day was a mistake. Marvel wanted to return Peter back to that single, irresponsible, young, relatable Peter Parker, but to me, that's just, those days are past. Especially because I grew up reading the 90s run of Amazing Spider-Man. I wasn't growing up in the 90s, but I was growing up reading back issues from the 90s. So my version of Spider-Man is the married, adult, responsible Peter Parker living in an apartment with his wife, Mary Jane, and that is where I would like to see Spider-Man get back to. I want him to get married to Mary Jane. I want him to settle down as a responsible adult while still balancing the responsibilities of being Spider-Man. So I'd really like to see them go back to that direction. And there's no one else to do it with than Mary Jane. They've tried other love interests. They tried Carly Cooper. He dated Mockingbird for a while. They did all of these, and everyone just knows that Mary Jane is his soulmate. So get them back together, get them married. It just needs to happen ASAP. Another thing I'd like to see going forward in the Amazing Spider-Man series is more Miles Morales. I think we've all agreed that everybody loves Miles Morales as a character, but they've always kind of kept him in his own title. And he should have his own title, don't get me wrong. He is his own leading character in his own right. But we all know that Amazing Spider-Man is always the main series when it comes to the Spider-Man Spider-Verse. So I'd like to see Miles featured more prominently in the main title. What I'd really love to see is Peter becoming that responsible adult married Spider-Man and mentoring the young teen Miles Morales. So let him be the young superhero. Let Peter be the older, wiser mentor to Miles. So I'd really love to see Miles more in the main series, kind of teaming up with Peter Parker. And then going forward, have Peter and Mary Jane have their daughter. I would love to see May or Anne or whatever they decide to name her in the main universe. I want Peter and MJ to have that daughter because it would be really cool to see. I think what they could do is have Mary Jane get pregnant and have the baby, and then Peter kind of wants to focus on being a father, so Miles Morales has to kind of take over as the main Spider-Man. And I think it'd be really interesting to see that in the main series, where Miles Morales is kind of running around as Spider-Man, Peter is there in a mentor role and also jumps in as Spider-Man to help in serious emergencies, but otherwise is raising his daughter with Mary Jane. And then way, way, way down the line, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, I'd love to see their daughter become Spider-Woman and have her become kind of the main character. I think a great timeline for that would be to get Peter and MJ married ASAP, maybe in issue 900, maybe soon after. but then have Peter Parker and MJ be married for the next 100 or so issues, and I think a great point to announce her pregnancy would be issue 1000, along with whatever big story they choose to do. We're obviously a couple years away from issue 1000, so I'm sure they're starting to think of what they want to do for that, because that is a huge milestone. So I think a really exciting thing to happen in that issue would be if Mary Jane tells Peter that she's pregnant, and then they could go forward from there, having that baby and moving into those stories. And from there, they could raise the kid. It could be Peter Parker with toddler baby for many, many, many years, and then she grows and gets older and becomes a teenager, and kind of make it a generational thing, similar to what we're seeing in Venom right now, where Eddie Brock's son is kind of becoming the teenage Venom. I'd love to see that with Peter Parker's daughter 10 years in the future. All in all, I think the future is bright for The Amazing Spider-Man. This book is obviously not going anywhere anytime soon. So, to sum up this video, Nick Spencer's run had an awesome conclusion to a great run. Sinister War, not so much, but this issue was really, really great. I'm looking forward to the next run. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. I will, of course, be talking about it here. Once we get through maybe the first storyline of Beyond, I'll probably make a video talking about it. So if you want to see that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That'll be coming here. I will also be talking about all of my weekly comic book pickups on my live streams on this channel. If you haven't checked those out yet, it's called Around the Boxes. It's a live stream where I just kind of hang out, talk about comic books. I show you guys my pickups. I'm going through my collection, showing you some of my books in there, and just generally talking about comic books and superheroes and stuff like that. So if you want to come and hang out in the chat, definitely tune into those live streams, or you can watch them as a VOD, of course, as well. Sorry I haven't been pumping out videos quite as much as I intended to. I've just been extremely busy lately. I started my new job recently, so I am going to be pumping out more videos like this one, as well as other videos very, very soon. I have tons of content coming, I promise. One thing that will definitely motivate me to make more videos is if this video gets a lot of likes. So if you enjoy this video and you want to see more, please hit that like button. It really will mean a lot to me and will encourage me to get more videos out soon. I promise they're coming. Also, I would love to hear from you guys. Comment down below, what are your thoughts on this issue and Nick Spencer's run as a whole? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Where would you rank it compared to Dan Slott's run? And what are you guys thinking about going into Beyond? What would you like to see from it? What are you worried about? What are you excited for? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single comment and I try to respond to as many as I can. So leave your comments and I will be reading those. I will see you guys very, very soon. Just to add a couple more social plugs, go ahead and subscribe to my other channel, DA Games. I do gaming live streams over there. Gonna be ramping those up as well. And if you aren't already, follow me on Twitter at... What's my Twitter at? At RealDATweets. You guys can go follow me there. I'm gonna try and tweet more, talking about comic books, talking about movies, all sorts of stuff like that. Anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling. Thank you for watching this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.